From the battlefields to the boardrooms, the spirit of a veteran is unyielding. Risk takers, disciplined executors, team builders. Military service has forged us into professionals with the ability to get it done. But what's next after service? Meet the legends. Fred Smith, founder of FedEx. Jewett Cathy, founder of Chick-fil-A. Ross Perot, founder of Perot Systems. Phil Knight, founder of Nike. And Gordon Logan, founder of Sport Clips. They turned their military discipline into entrepreneurial success. And so can you. Why franchising? It's the ideal pathway for a vetrepreneur. A proven business model, a roadmap to success, and an industry that understands the skills you bring. Franchising means using proven systems, intensive training, and a support system designed to make you successful. 1 out of every 7 franchises is owned by a military veteran. You can join their ranks. Your next mission awaits, and we're here to guide you. Your legacy is just beginning.
Fantastic. Hi, everybody. My name is Sarah Brown. I am a Navy veteran. I have owned several franchises, and I am a coach with Vetrepreneur. So I am here today to walk you through some information for you to kickstart your search into small business ownership through franchising. We're going to talk about franchising 101. We're going to talk about the coaching process. How do we help guide you through this process? One of the things that I love about that video is the statistic that 1 out of every 7 franchise owner is a veteran, and it's a much heavier representation than veterans in the community, and that's a testament to our ability to execute, our fortitude, and that type of thing. So if you've ever dreamed of owning your own business, but have no idea doing what, well, then franchising may supply the what for you. Franchising at its core is really a marriage of a licensing arrangement with business systems layered on top. So it would give you the ability to own a business without having to reinvent the wheel, without having more of a turnkey systems and processes. So if you have that entrepreneurial drive, we will help you navigate the process to figure out what is a good fit for you. And job number 1 will be, is franchising a fit for you? And if it is, and for most people, it really can be a good fit, what are the characteristics of a franchise and a business that would be a good fit for you? We do all of this at no cost to you. The Vetrepreneur coaching services are always complementary to you. Our business model is that of a executive recruiter, and the franchisor, if someone does move forward, pays us a small fee, but you don't pay more to work with a coach because franchising is regulated and the fees are the fees. So the franchises provide the business plan, and veterans were trained, and it's in our DNA to execute against said plan. So there's a lot of things that you can get out of being a small business owner, like financial freedom, autonomy, and building more of a nest egg and being more in charge of your own destiny, which was very appealing to me when I bought and ran my first franchise. But before we dive into that, let's learn a little bit more about all of you. I'll point out that we do have a chat. You can put your questions in the chat, but first and foremost, what branch of service are you in? While you're doing that, I'm going to say, typically a lot of people, you'll have questions about financing and funding. Some of our financial minimums in order to be able to show you a certain amount of options are a 680 and above credit score, 20 to 50,000 liquid. Think about that coming from you. It can be cash, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. We're pretty even here. Navy comes in hot at about 43%. We have a lot of folks on the call today from all over the country. Okay. And military spouse, I'm glad to see that. We strongly recommend We work with the veterans and their family members. Often we work directly with the military spouse. No Space Force or Air Force yet, but okay. Well, thank you. So we have a good representation here. Please click on the QR code and you can join in the chat here. But let's go to the next question. This is more open-ended. I'm a glass is half full kind of gal. What is exciting to you about owning your own business? I know I left the Navy. I was in the Navy for only about 5 years and spent over a decade in corporate America. I really wanted to keep more of what I made for other people for myself. I wanted a certain amount of autonomy and freedom and being my own boss. Some people want to set a legacy for family members, adult children. They may want to involve friends and family in their business. So those are a good ones. Direction, autonomy, absolutely. So you're thinking along the right line. Even though you may own a franchise, you are not an employee. This is going to be your business. Your business just happens to be running a mobile pet grooming franchise or a blinds franchise or a food franchise. Fantastic. Okay. Scaling, being able to be a full-time mom, having some balance, absolutely. Okay, so let's go into the next question, which is more, what are some of the concerns or maybe gaps in your knowledge that you want to learn a little bit more about? So I know a lot of people have questions around spouse. One of the biggest reasons that people do not do it is a spousal objection. So regardless of whether your significant other is going to be involved in the business, that's up to the two of you. They should be supportive of the idea. Insurance, that's a big one. Can you make a leap? Benefits, debt, absolutely. Which franchise to choose? The coaching really does help with the matching. So I think that's a good one. And marketing, one of the beauties of franchising is that you're not reinventing the wheel on a lot of programs like operations and marketing. You're project managing a lot of those things, not reinventing them, if you will. And then capital. So a lot of these items listed here, we're going to get to and talk about in much more detail. Okay, thank you for participating, everybody. That's a good little word cloud there to start the information session. Okay, I have the honor of introducing my friend and fellow classmate from the Naval Academy. I'm embarrassed, Chris, to say what year, but I'm just going to say it. Class of 91. Go 91.
I'm not embarrassed, Sarah. Let's get after that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. My husband is also a class of 91, a classmate of ours. But Chris is the co-founder of Vetrepreneur over 20 years ago. Chris has a background in naval aviation and obviously entrepreneurship and in the business community. And what you'll see here is that there's a lot of different areas that we're involved in, like by veteran, a lot of rankings, like the military friendly ranking, that is us, and by veteran, and then the Vetrepreneur program that you are here to learn more about. So without further ado, Chris, take it away.
Thank you, classmate. Appreciate it. Listen, Sarah doesn't tell you either, but she had a twin sister that attended the Naval Academy with her. So, and her father was a retired Navy chief. So she's got a really, really strong heritage of military service. And if there was something to do in franchising, Sarah did it. So she's just a phenomenal addition to our team and just emblematic of all the coaches that we've got that are just highly qualified. Listen, guys, the reason I got into this is that for many, many years, some of the things you've seen there, right? We founded the National Veteran-Owned Business Association, the Vetrepreneur of the Year program, Vetrepreneur magazine. We were really instrumental in encouraging, I guess, not necessarily official lobbying, but definitely encouraging through media sources for the government to meet its 3% goal for service-disabled veteran-owned businesses at the federal level. We were instrumental in getting state laws passed that included veteran-owned businesses within that state contract legislation. Lots and lots of stuff related to to veterans in business. Started the Buy Veteran program, BUY Veteran, which encourages Americans to buy products and services from the 2.5 million veteran-owned businesses in the United States. But the one thing prior to a few years ago that we were not able to provide is an answer to the question of, I really would love to get into business. I feel like I'm well qualified, well trained. The military trained me how to, execute a business plan. I just don't have a great idea for a new product or service, and I don't have a ton of experience in an industry to know how to disrupt it. And that was the vast majority of people. And we just really didn't know where to send them. We eventually said, well, geez, franchising is the choice, right? That is the thing. And we started having a franchise coaching service because we realized that people that wanted to get into franchising didn't know how to do it, didn't know where to start, didn't know who to trust. They get information from a lot of places. And so really what you're seeing here today is the culmination of solving a lot of problems and a lot of seizing a lot of opportunities that we had veterans who were interested in becoming business owners and franchise owners for many, many years. And that's what we've got here today. So we're going to talk about franchising. At the end of this 1 hour session, you guys are going to have a really good background education on what it means to be, what franchising means. And, you could pass an initial quiz on it, right? You'll know enough to determine if you want to take the next step into franchise ownership. So we'll get started. We're going to talk about franchising, right? So within franchising, you've got a franchisor. That's the mothership. Think of that. I call them mom and dad, right? Those are the people who have created the franchise, the original system. They have created that playbook, right? As veterans, we've all use some sort of a playbook. When we were doing military training, for me, it was called a NATOPS manual. And that manual was about this thick, and it had every situation that we would possibly encounter on how to safely operate and maintain a P-3 Orion aircraft, to go out and look for submarines, which is what our mission was. But regardless of what you did in the military, you had that same thing. So the ability to sort of take that manual and execute it, that franchisor is the entity that creates that operating manual. And then the franchisee, sometimes we'll refer to them as just a Z, that is you, right? That is the person who is going to license that franchise intellectual property and implement that business at the local level. So it's a great way for a franchise system to expand by licensing the ability for independent owners at the local level that use the intellectual property, use the trade secrets, use the operating manual, use all the processes, the vendor list, all that stuff to run that business. But it is your business, right? As a franchisee, your LLC, your corporation, you own it in its entirety, but you are licensed to be able to operate that by the franchisor. Okay, next slide. Some of the facts around franchising, some really staggering numbers. In fact, I just got back earlier this week. I was out in Las Vegas for the annual convention for the International Franchise Association and saw all of the latest numbers. A massive, massive event. There had to have been tens of thousands of people there. It was a great event. And so all the franchise leaders in the US and even internationally were there. And so got to, experience this really firsthand this week. It was phenomenal. But at any given year in the United States, there will be somewhere between 13 and 20,000 franchisees that will open a franchise territory. And 1 out of 7 of those, people are really astounded to hear that. 1 in 7 franchisees is owned by a military veteran. Now, you may say, well, okay, but how many should there be? Well, only 1 in 20 working age Americans is a veteran. So veterans are literally 3 times as likely to own a franchise as a non-veteran. That is an incredible level of overrepresentation, meaning that there will be about 2,500 veterans that open a franchise this year, literally 6 or 7 a day. And so the question that we will hopefully be able to answer for you at the end of the process is, could you be one of those? And we'll see where that goes. Okay, next slide. Some of those advantages to franchising, listen, somebody else has already figured out the process, right? I can tell you from somebody who has started businesses from scratch, it is extremely expensive. It is extremely time consuming to figure everything out from the outset, right? The market opportunities, the market sizes, the mix of products and services, tweaking the product and service to make sure that it's just right, understanding how you market it, the vendors that you're going to use and the supply chain and all the relationships and the contracts, everything, right? All of that takes an incredible amount of time. And there's a reason that like 90% of new businesses from scratch, not necessarily franchises, but new business startups fail in the first year is for that reason, right? There's a lot of trial and error, and you're going to make lots of mistakes. You just hope that if you're the 1 in 10, those don't prove to be fatal. What franchising gives you, conversely, is an opportunity to leverage all of that knowledge that somebody else has already figured out, right? And they've made it to a point where they are now going to start licensing that business. That business is mature enough, the processes are mature enough, the products and services are proven enough that they're going to now start scaling that business through licensing that to franchise owners throughout the country. And so you get to leverage somebody else's knowledge, learn from their mistakes, and it's a much, much more proven business model for success. So it really mitigates. I like to say it's like bowling with you're very unlikely to roll a gutter ball, and a lot of those lanes have already been, cleared for you, and it really mitigates. It doesn't eliminate the risk. Let me make no mistake. This is a business. You own it. You're going to invest in it. You need to work hard to be able to execute the business plan, but you don't have to write the business plan, and you don't have to prove it out. That's already been done for you. Okay, next slide. What do you pay for that, right? So there's a one-time fee upfront called a franchise fee that you will pay. Typically, that's anywhere from $40,000 to $60,000. And that basically gives you the rights to the territory. It gives you the administrative setup. All the point of sale and accounting software typically has been selected and plugged in for you. It gives you access to that operating manual, gives you access to the vendors and the supply chain, obviously the trade secrets, the name, the intellectual property, all of that stuff. And I like to say, listen, it's almost like having corporate, if you're corporate doing that corporate stuff. The other thing that's interesting about franchise fees, they are veterans in many, many cases are eligible for discounts on that franchise fee. I would say the vast majority of franchises offer that. I've seen it as high as 100% of the franchise fee covered if you're a veteran and basically waived. Typically, it's 10, 20%, somewhere in there. And I would also say I've really never seen any other group outside of a veteran have access to a discount on that franchise fee. And I think that speaks volumes for the way that the veteran community, the way the franchising community really views veterans. They don't offer franchise fee discounts because they value your service. They are grateful for your service, like all Americans are, but they do that because they realize that you're well-trained, right? You know how to execute, you know how to run an operating manual, you know how to lead employees, and there's a proven track record for that, which is why veterans are 3 times as likely to own a franchise as non-veterans. The other fee that you're going to pay for that, next slide if you could, is royalties. And royalties are a percentage of your revenue. So these, unlike franchise fees, which is a one-time fee up front, royalties are ongoing. So think of royalties as paying for that C level, right? The franchisor will have a staff. It will be, if it's a smaller franchise system, it may be a few people. If it's a very, very large franchise system, it's going to be lots and lots of people. But it's your C level, right? It's your CEO, it's your chief marketing officer, it's your chief research officer. It's where all the R&D and the new innovation on products and services come out from. They will typically run your marketing campaigns. They will create the marketing creative, and all of that is done for you. And so, as a result, you don't have to have that. So a lot of times people look at royalties, they're like, well, geez, I've got to pay a royalty. And sometimes people will even compare them side by side. Well, this franchise offers, you have to pay a 5% royalty, and this one's 7% or 8%. Well, geez, I'm going to pick the one that's 5. I can tell you what you really need to understand is, what do you get in exchange for that, right? Because the 5% you get a lot less than you would something at 7 or 8%. So you just need to dig into it. You can't just take it at surface value. But at the end of the day, you don't have to have a C-level. You don't have to have a research and development department. You don't have to have a marketing department that is creating new creatives. You don't have to worry about vendor selection, a lot of that stuff, or the point of sale vendors. All of that stuff is typically included within that. So there's a lot of stuff that you don't have to do. And what that does, not only you don't have to be an expert in that, outsource that to the franchisor who is the expert. That enables you as well to focus all of your time and attention and energy on running the business at the local level. So it's a real prioritization benefit as well. Okay, next slide. Back to Sarah.
Thanks, Chris. So, one of the things as a coach that we will work with you on is, what is the operating model that makes the most sense for you? Every single franchise can be run owner-operator, meaning you're going to be involved in the daytime operation, also known as an owner-manager. So if you want a wholesale change, maybe you've been downsized, going full-time into your franchise can be a great option. Now, that doesn't mean that over time, maybe a year or two down the road, you can't back off more. Otherwise, you probably have bought a very expensive job, and let's not do that. So, even an owner operator for the first couple years, maybe you can back off over time. What is very unique to franchising is the second option, which is semi-absentee. About a third of all franchises, you can run the franchise with a general manager and be more passive right from the beginning. So what that means is, maybe you have a great job. Maybe you've invested a lot of your time, experience into your day job, and you don't want to leave it. Maybe you're a couple years away from retirement. You can run a franchise semi-absentee, meaning 15 to 20 hours a week. So the franchisor must allow that model. And what that means typically is that you will hire a key employee or a general manager that will typically go through a majority of the franchise training just like you would. So heavily relevant in retail, meaning a lot of retail franchises like automotive, food and beverage, health and beauty and fitness can be run more passively with a general manager. I owned a fitness franchise and ran it in a semi-absentee fashion. Are there a few more service franchises with a home office or a small office that can be run semi-absentee? Yes, just not as many. So really think about, how do you want to run this? Do you want to keep your day job, or do you want a complete change of scenery and jump in with both feet? Doesn't mean that you would have to quit your job immediately, but it means down the road, once you're operating, you would be full-time if you want to run this in an owner-operator fashion. Okay. So the FDD, one of the things that is very attractive to a lot of people about franchising is that there's a certain amount of transparency that must be shared with you. And so if a franchisor is going to share details about their franchise system with you, they have to give you the franchise disclosure document to follow along. So the good news is it's supposed to be written in plain English, although we all know it was probably written by an attorney. But if you have a lot of experience with legalese, I think you'll find this is a little bit easier to read than the typical contract. But the nice thing is, if you're looking at a retail fitness franchise and a mobile pet grooming or a senior care franchise, those are very different businesses. But the good news is that in the FDD, if you're looking at all three, they're going to have the same 23 items in the same order. So in theory, you can do more of an apples to apples comparison. It will always include the business experience of the executive team. If there's any litigation in the past few years, they have to include that. Item 5, 6, and 7 are always going to be the fees. The initial franchise fee, then ongoing fees like royalty, technology, and a brand fee. Item 7 is important because that is going to be the total initial investment range, and it may vary quite a bit. And the reason it may vary, especially if it's a brick and mortar retail franchise, is that New York City is not Kansas City. And so, they will give you a lot of notes along with that so you can see what goes in that. Your obligations to participate in the business. The franchisor's obligations to you are outlined in the item 11, such as their obligation to support you in the training and then ongoing. Territory is very important. How does protected territory work in their franchise system? If you own a service franchise like senior care or like a fencing franchise, can you take customers outside of your own territory? Probably, as long as someone else doesn't own it, but you typically can't market outside of your own territory. And then your obligation to participate in the business. So if it is a semi-passive available franchise, that will be outlined in the item 15. Your exit strategy, what happens when you want to renew? What happens if you close before the end of the term without selling it? What happens if you want to sell this business, which in franchise speak is a transfer? All of that will be very, very clear to you. Then the item 19, a lot of people read it like a mystery novel and go right to the item 19 to see if there is an earnings claim. It is the optional item. Most will make one, but whatever they disclose around franchisee earnings, that is all the franchisor may speak to as it relates to earnings representations, which is a reason why step 8 validation is the most important step, and we'll get to that. And then their success and or failure rate will be outlined in the item 20. Anything that you may be asked to sign as a franchise owner, like the franchise agreement, any other forms will be included as an exhibit to the franchise disclosure document. They will ask you to sign a receipt. Feel free to sign it. Doesn't obligate you to anything. It just means they gave it to you. And then there is a cooling off period of 14 days. So when you get an FDD, the earliest you can sign a franchise agreement is 14 days. So they want you to have a minimum amount of time to be able to review some of the documents. Okay. And what are some of the myths of franchising? One of the big ones is that it's all food. Are there some great food franchises? Absolutely. I have a food corporate background with Boston Market, but there's a lot more to franchising than food. Food is the only industry that often may require relevant industry experience. So at Vetrepreneur, we tend to focus more on simpler food that maybe doesn't require that or is not such high initial capital, but it's more than just food. There are 15 different industries, and that includes senior care, home services, real estate, business to business franchises, health and beauty and fitness. And we go pretty deep into each of those 15 categories. One of the big myths is, well, I can't buy a franchise. I've never owned a business. Contraire. Most of the time, people that buy a franchise have not owned a business before. Probably about 15 to 20% of people that we work with have owned a non-franchise business. And quite frankly, they don't want to work that hard ever again, building something from scratch. And maybe they're looking at a franchise to be a little more passive or to add to their portfolio. The beauty of franchising is that the franchisor is going to provide a lot of the project management for you to start and go to market in your business with this particular franchise. Often you may want a change of scenery. Maybe you work in IT and you're like, IT's been good to me, but I want a little change. Well, you know what? You don't need relevant industry experience, which is myth 3. The franchisor brings that experience. You will become more of a subject matter expert over time. So often they almost prefer you don't have industry experience because you don't have preconceived notions. They're the subject matter expert on how to go to market with their particular franchise. And you bring your professional experience to your local ownership. Myth number 4, I'm not going to tell you it's not expensive, but obviously that's relative. Service franchises are going to be anywhere from 100 to 250,000 total, maybe a little bit less, but that's a good kind of range. Retail is going to be 2 to 4 times that amount of initial capital or expense. So the bottom line is that financial fit is a big part of fit. Some of our clients are very high net worth, but they may not want to invest that much. Maybe they have a certain amount set aside. So we'll talk about what is comfortable for you and what can you finance and what are your thoughts around how much you want to invest. And then it's too risky. Life is not without risk. And as Chris says, this is a business. So of course there's risk to it. Our franchise is typically less risky than starting up something from scratch. Well, certainly, because you can look at their FDD, see their track record, and kind of know what their experience and success rate has been. Really, the trick is finding something that's a good fit for you. Okay. So how do I fund my business? I mentioned at the beginning, kind of a good rule of thumb for minimum financial qualifications for us to be able to show you a certain amount of options are 680 and above credit score, higher is better, of course, 50,000 minimum liquid capital. Can that be cash? Certainly. But often it's a combination of cash, home equity, cash, and maybe some retirement funds or friends and family kind of thing. So it really just depends. And then net worth. Net worth is 150 and above. Net worth 200,000, of course, and above is much better. But we have a calculator on vetrepreneur.com under step 2 for you to figure out kind of a good rule of thumb or a good estimate of your total net worth. This includes everything: equity in your home, any investment properties that you may have, stocks, bonds, retirement accounts. You may not use them, but that all goes into your net worth. Net worth, we need to know that because that goes into loan qualification. If you go to any franchise website, they're going to have a liquid and a net worth requirement because they know what makes a good loan candidate for their respective franchise. I mentioned that 100 to 200,000 is pretty typical for a home-based kind of service franchise, 2 times or even higher for a brick and mortar. So how do people fund this? SBA, Small Business Administration loan, is the most common. The SBA is a guarantor, not a bank. SBA, you typically are getting slightly better interest rates than a non-SBA business loan. A good rule of thumb for an SBA loan, if you're looking at a total project, let's say it's 300,000 is the total. That's everything: the one-time franchise fee, equipment, inventory, initial insurance, and a healthy amount of working capital. You should be comfortable with 10 to 30% of that as your liquid or equity injection. The rest can be financed if you meet the franchisor's typical net worth requirements. So I would be comfortable with 20 or 30% of that, which would be 60 to 90,000 coming from you. The rest can be financed. HELOC, home equity line of credit, a lot of people will use that for funding, whether it's to beef up their liquid or cash amount, or just for some of the overall funding. Something that is probably new to most of you is a rollover for business startup. And that's how I funded my first franchise. So that is using my retirement account, and it is self-funding. I did not get a loan. I completely self-funded. I had about 600,000 in a retirement account. I rolled over about 350,000 of that into a C corporation, and I had a company, a reputable national company, that set up a retirement account to roll that over into. So instead of rolling over my retirement into another employer's retirement account, I rolled it over into my C corporation company's account. Then I issued stock, and that paid for the whole thing. You must have a C corporation. It's the only funding type that dictates the entity, but it was great. For me, I didn't want to get a loan. I wanted to self-fund, and that was great. Now, if you're currently working and you have no plan on leaving, and your retirement account is tied up in that, then that will not be an option for you. Are there ways to leverage retirement accounts and taking a portfolio loan or taking a loan out of it or withdrawal? Absolutely. And we'll talk about that more as time goes on if you want to work with us. And then friends and family. Friends and family is something that a lot of us sort of don't think about, but especially with parents, and they may give you money anyway, they may want to give it to you up front to help invest in your business. Okay. Chris, back to you.
You got it. Okay. The other question I mentioned earlier that we got a lot is, how do I go about becoming a franchise owner, right? Looking into the chat, and I was trying to answer a couple of those questions up front there. And just having done this as long as we've done it, we recognize that that's where people go first, right? That's where we go for information. We're going to go to Google, we're going to go to Bing, whatever it is. We're going to look at the AI results. We're going to look at the other search results, and we're going to start looking around at stuff. The problem with that is it's really hard to come up with a real good process that gives you the right information at the right time. The timing of when you get the information and the timing of when you get the next piece of information is really critically important. So the sequential steps are important. Getting that information from trusted sources, being able to evaluate perspectives on all of that information, all of that stuff is really critically important. And so when most people start Googling or using AI to get into franchising, most people end up ultimately stopping that process. And the reason is because they get the wrong information at the wrong time from the wrong sources. They don't know who to trust. They don't know who not to trust. And it's really difficult to evaluate that unless you've got some experience and some perspective that gives you the perspective to do that. And we call that going to the franchise buffet, right? When I go to a buffet, I have a lot of discipline in my life. Food is not one of those. I can't go into a food buffet. If I do, I end up eating the wrong stuff in the wrong order, and I leave with a not feeling real good about myself. And so what we've done is we've solved for the franchise buffet, and that's what you see here. So we've taken the pathway to franchise ownership and broken that down into 10 steps and into 3 phases. You can see the 10 steps there at the top in yellow, and you can see the 3 phases down below in gray. So the first phase is franchise selection. The second phase is we've narrowed that down to 1 or 2 businesses, and we're going to dive really deep. That's called due diligence. We're going to do the due diligence on that. And then the 3rd phase is what we call decision. And that's when we're going to ultimately, you're going to find out from the franchisor if they think you're well suited for their business. If they do, they'll offer for you to come to decision day, and then they'll ultimately make you that offer to come and open a franchise system. And then you'll have typically about 7 to 10 days to respond and say yes or no to that. So at no point through any of this are you committed, to owning a franchise. You're only committed to owning a franchise when you get to step 10, which is signing the franchise agreement. Excuse me. Prior to that, no commitment whatsoever. And so what we see going through this is that first phase is really around, like I said, franchise selection. Franchise boot camp is step one. So you've done step one. This is it. If you want to proceed further after this, if you feel like this is something you want to keep looking into, you can go into what we call self-assessment. And takes about 10 to 15 minutes and fill out a bunch of information. It'll give us a very, very detailed report that lays out all of the things that makes you unique and the things that tie you to a particular franchise. It really helps us in the whole franchise selection. From there, we have a discovery meeting. You'll have a 1-hour discovery meeting with your coach. You'll go over all the self-assessment stuff. We'll go over all the everything around what makes you special, your skills, your lifestyle, what makes you tick, why you want to do this, ultimately leading to a franchise options call. And so in that franchise options call, your coach will lay out typically 12 to 15 franchise systems that, with all of this information, these are the ones that we feel like would be a good match for you. From there, matching you up with one or two, selecting one or two, and going down the pathway of having some franchisor calls. We'll get into funding. We'll hook you up with a CPA. We'll go over the different funding choices and really the custom financing that makes it the most sense for you. The FDD review that Sarah talked about, validation, our favorite step, which is where you get to talk with other franchise owners in the system. And the cool thing about that is that they can share with you a lot of financial information on their success. How long did it take them to get to cash flow positive? How long did it, how much money do they make every year? How much stuff do they write off in their business? All of that stuff they can share with you. The franchisor is only legally allowed to share the stuff that is in the item 19 of the FDD. And the coach is also only allowed to share that, which is what makes the validation really, really important and really helpful. Those other franchise owners in the system can reveal to you whatever information that they, want to. And usually they're very revealing with all that. And then finally, like I talked about, discovery day. And if they offer and you say yes, you become a franchise owner, you sign the franchise agreement, and you do your training, and you're off to the races. And so that whole process typically takes about 70 days. Sometimes it takes up to 3 months, sometimes maybe even 4 months. But the goal here, guys, is to get you to a decision point. The goal is not to get you necessarily into franchise ownership. Yes, for some of you, that makes sense. But really the goal is, first and foremost, to decide if franchising is right for you. And the second goal is, if yes, which franchise are you most well suited for? Okay, next slide. Franchise selection. Again, I will tell you that the worst reason to do, there are some really bad reasons for choosing a franchise, right? One of those is going to the buffet. Another one is going and saying, well, show me the list of the franchises that are going to make me the most money. Or, the best franchises for veterans, or the best franchises in food, or whatever. The problem with choosing a franchise that way is that those franchises are being run by people who are well suited, who have been well matched. And every franchise is unique in terms of the fit of a franchisee that's going to be optimal for running that system. And every franchisee is unique. So it is impossible. It'd be like, me trying to wear another person's suit off the rack, right? And to think that it's going to fit and have a nice fit. It's very unlikely that that's going to happen. Sometimes you get lucky, but we go about this extremely deliberately. Another reason that is really bad to choose a franchise is, hey, a friend of mine opened up a franchise, and an XYZ franchise, and they're very, very successful doing it. Again, not a great reason, because you're not a carbon copy of that other person. And so we look at really science and experience and putting all of those things behind it. What is your why, right? What are you pursuing? Why are you pursuing? What do you want to get out of this? What are your fears? What are the things that are going to hold you back? What are your skills and interests? What lifestyle do you have Now, what lifestyle do you want in that franchise system? And then finally, these last two are, pretty binary. What is your financial capacity? Can you afford this franchise? And what are your geographical preferences? So is it available in the area where you live and where you want to operate? Okay, next slide. Back to Sarah.
It helps if I unmute myself. So, okay. Thanks, Chris. So what do we do? And I do want to address a question that was in there saying that, hey, I mentioned that I was a former franchisee. Why don't I still own? That's a great question. And the only reason I would like to think if I still lived in those states, I would still own them. But I moved several states away in both cases. And, I was semi-passive in one franchise, but not, I like going in periodically and being somewhat involved. So anyway, I only sold them because I did move. And that was one of the beauties of franchising for me, was having the franchisor assist and help me in the resale, and I was able to successfully sell them. So what does franchise coaching do? It's really to help you determine, does franchising make sense? And if so, securing the right franchise. So we are here to help you, hold you accountable. And as Chris said, some of you have probably looked or thought about this for years and saying, hey, you know what? I'm going to give this my full attention and figure out if I can do this or not. All of our coaches are experienced business owners and military veterans. So our coaching services are free, and we're paid a small referral fee from the franchisor if and when someone buys a franchise. There's a QR code that you can sign up for the one-on-one coaching. So 7 individual coaching sessions, typically a good cadence is 7 to 10 days that we meet with our clients. 24/7 access. I usually reply within a couple hours or immediately if I'm available. We help with the matching and then connect you with partners for accounting, tax planning, financing, and a franchise attorney if that is something that you want to do and that we do recommend. So please sign up for the coaching if you've considered it at all. This is a good first step to see, does this make sense for you? Okay. So who is Vetrepreneur? The top row is the Vetrepreneur coaching team. So you can see all of us, Chris and myself, and then we have Doug, Brittany, and Jeff are probably the folks that are doing the most coaching. And then our second row is our Vetrepreneur team that is working on a lot of things behind the scenes, working on our portal, working with some of the franchisors that we work with, and marketing, and really making sure that you have what you need to be successful in your due diligence. And then the bottom row are some of our concierge partners. These are folks like a CPA, like funding experts, franchise attorneys. Typically, they will have a complimentary review session with you, and then you pay them if you decide to do something with them. For those of you that where maybe your credit is not fantastic, it's below 680, we do have a credit repair specialist that we work closely with that we could connect you with. And so having the Vetrepreneur team in your corner and then our concierge partners, you really have what you need to be able to make a good, well-informed decision. Okay, so I would say you do have this. So here's an example of a couple of our clients. You'll notice that half, or more than half, I'm sorry, I forgot one picture, more than half are couples. You will see a lot of couples in franchising, obviously not required, but even if a significant other is not going to be involved full time, once again, it's a big decision for the family. And typically they're a yin to each other's yang. One of them might take the role as more of the face of the business. One may take more of an operational role, but you'll see they're from across different military branches and different backgrounds. Okay. So, Chris, we have a lot of questions. And you have been answering them in the chat as they come in. So that's spectacular. Okay. This is a very good question, and I'm going to take this. If validation is so important, why isn't it earlier in the process? And that's a great question. And there's a couple reasons for that. And the main reason is another reason why you don't get the FDD on the intro call. You get it typically after the second or the third call with a franchisor. It's because they want you to understand enough about the business, the terminology, the levers, how does the business run, what makes it grow, so it makes sense. You don't get a 200 plus page document if you don't have any context about how the business works. Why the fees? What are you getting for the fees? What is happening? How does it fit into the industry? What makes them different? And in validation, they want you to understand enough so it can be a good use of your time, and quite frankly, a good use of the franchisee's time. Franchisees are not employees. They're not required to take these calls. Most of them want to. I know I used to enjoy it, but it was a good chunk of my time when I did take those calls. And they want to make sure it's a good use of time, that you know enough about the business that it just makes sense. So that's why it's at step 8.
Sarah, if I could just briefly add to that. Listen, guys, this isn't there. Another reason it's step 8 is because if you just went around with skipping steps 1 through 7, or even skipping, just a few of the steps of 1 through 7, and just started walking around and popping your head into different franchise systems of brick and mortar, or home services or whatever, and just asking the owners about stuff, you're going to get you're going to be led down a certain path that may have absolutely nothing to do with you being well suited for that franchise. And so it's just, and that's going to lead to bad things. So this has been laid out purposely for a reason, to help you make an informed decision. What we want at the end of this 10 weeks is you have the ability to make an informed decision. And if we start skipping steps, or going to the buffet, or doing a bunch of extra stuff, or it's going to be impossible to do that.
Absolutely. Can spouses be involved? Yes, yes, and yes. So not only can they be involved, they probably should be involved. And, if you're going to sign up for coaching, if your significant other can be a part of that initial call, all the better. I say the more the merrier, and I would encourage that if it's possible. Okay, so Chris, are there 100% remote franchises?
There are. I think what they're probably asking, are they semi-absentee, meaning I don't have to be kind of doing it full time? And the answer to that question is yes. So there are some of those, but I would say you're going to ultimately get out of this what you can put into it. If you want to be semi-absentee, and semi-absentee probably means anywhere from 10 to 15 or 20 hours a week that you're working on the business. You're going to need to probably hire someone to run the day-to-day operations, or to do different components of the business, and that may cost a little bit more. So yes, there are some semi-absentee options. In terms of remote, I think if you mean home-based, yes, there are some home-based businesses as well. In fact, there's quite a few that do not involve having a brick and mortar location.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And in fact, I've owned one of each, a service franchise with a small office, and a brick and mortar retail franchise. And there are advantages to both, but typically for most people, I had a good thought, Chris, and it just flew out of my head. So never mind. It'll come back to me here in a second. Okay. There are a few folks in the chat that are saying they have a net worth of well under 100,000. Should they wait? I would say yes. You're not going to be able to look at enough options to make it worth your while to do a compare and contrast and really find a good fit if you're that financially limited. And quite frankly, there's just not going to be enough options to look at. So I would say that would be job number one, unless you have a potential partner, friend, or family member who may partner up with you in the business, and then you're combining your resources, if you will. There's a question around, can another family member be involved? Absolutely. I work with a lot of folks that part of the goal is that the business is maybe a legacy business, or they want to have a business with their brother or their adult children, and they may want to have them run it or own it down the road. So absolutely. Okay. All right. Are there special fundings, Chris, or discounts for disabled veterans? How does that work into franchising?
Yeah, regardless of your disability status, if the franchise offers a discount on the franchise fee, you'll be eligible for that. There are, for disabled veterans, the VA does have a vocational rehab program. It's called VRNE, which there are some options now, I believe. There are a lot of requirements behind it, but there are some options to use VRNE money, voc rehab money, to pursue opening a business. But if you Google VA VRNE program, self-employment program, you can find some details on that. I would say this though. I would say and I understand now that that's becoming a little more significant. However, for the vast majority of people, the primary funding source is going to be the mainstream stuff. Usually the other stuff is sort of icing on the cake, but your SBA loans, your ROBs, your HELOCs, your home equity lines of credit, those are going to be your primary funding sources for the vast majority of people.
Absolutely. Because there's a couple questions in the chat around grants, and there are some grants available, but as Chris said, it's kind of the icing on the cake. It's not the entire cake. Typically that may help, but it's not going to more than likely pay for your entire franchise fee or your 20 to 30% equity injection into the business. There's a question here once again about our fee. You do not pay us. Our services are complimentary to you. The franchisor pays us if you do move forward. So that is how our business model works. There's a few questions here, Chris, around purchasing an existing franchise. And I would say that comes across or comes around occasionally, but not very much. I would say less than 5% of ours are resales, but they're usually one of two extremes. Either they're killing it, and they're doing really well, and this is their exit strategy, and you're paying a premium. So the capital may be high because, you're paying for that track record, the cash flow, the track record of the business, the assets, etc. So it may be a little higher capital, obviously much higher capital than starting that franchise from scratch, or maybe they're not doing well, or, so you have to evaluate that. Can a resale be a good fit for some people? Sure. But more than likely, that is not most of what we do. That is unusual. I'll put it that way. Okay. So a lot of questions around specific financials. I would say if your net worth is just right around 100,000, you can enter our process and sign up for coaching as long as you have that 20,000 plus liquid to be able to invest, because you do need both. You need the net worth, and you do need that 20 to 30% coming from you. But once again, give it some thought about, might you involve a friend or a family member? There may be other ways to come up with some of that capital. Okay. There are questions around, okay. You know what? I think we have answered most of them now that I'm looking at them, Chris, between your answering in the chat. There are questions around, do some of the franchises waive the franchise fee? Very rarely. Typically the average veteran vet fran discount off of the one-time franchise fee is 10%. More is better, obviously. However, Are there a few that have waived them entirely for veterans? I can only think of 2 off the top of my head. And but that is unusual.
Yep. Sarah, there's a couple more I think I can get to briefly here. Just one final thing on Sarah's great answer on resales. The only other thing I would add is with a resale, it's like buying a new home in a way. You've got to make sure that whatever, if it's successful and you're paying a premium for it, you've got to make sure that you are going to be able to replicate the things that made it successful. By the same token, if it's not successful and you're able to get it at a discount, you need to make sure that you can properly diagnose why it was not successful, and you've got to make sure that you can fix it. So there's a lot of extra due diligence and extra risk that comes with a resale for those reasons. Somebody said, I'm in the healthcare field. So if you are in the healthcare field, that is awesome. One of the industries that we like the best because it has such strong economic tailwinds is senior care. And so, having a healthcare background certainly can help there. Certainly not a requirement, but there are some things that can work well in. Somebody asked about what if you're receiving Social Security? I don't think that's an issue. You can choose to pay yourself as a W-2 or not. I think you have some flexibility when you own your own business in terms of paying yourself as a W-2. The other income that you come from that comes out of the business, you can usually create ways to shield that by working through a good accountant that's experienced in that area.
One of the other questions, Chris, I'll answer is someone lives in a rural area. Retail franchises will look at the entire market. So I live in St. Paul, Minnesota, and they'd say, hey, St. Paul or the Twin Cities can support 10 of these fitness franchises. Fantastic. And then they'll usually say it's this part of town where we need to develop. That's kind of how it works. In a service franchise like senior care or fencing or some other kind of home service, property management, property maintenance, they'll do a viable territory by their own demographics for the industry and the franchise. Like senior care, maybe like 250,000 people, 35,000 plus seniors. So if you're in a more rural area, it doesn't mean that that franchise may not work, but it means the territory may be much more spread out. And you may have to go to a population center for it to make sense. Where retail, it may be like one unit, might make sense, and that's it.
Yep. Another person asked about, can a family member be involved? We talked, Sarah talked a lot about spouses being involved. This person's asking about a son-in-law. Absolutely. Family, friends, being involved in the business oftentimes make the likelihood of high success much, much better. So you've got more people that have a vested interest in it. So yes.
Yeah. Having people that you know and trust in a business helps mitigate some of the risk. No question about it. So for those of you, there's a couple points saying, hey, I want to get started. And I say, fantastic, let's get started. Go to the QR code, sign up for coaching. Once you sign up for coaching, you will get a link to take our online assessment and really go with your gut reactions on that. There are no right answers. For example, if you don't love the idea of being the face of the business or being heavily involved in sales, well, don't say you do. The whole point is to find a good fit for you, not for the assessment. So be as candid as you can, and we will use that as a good starting point when we start the coaching process. Okay. So I believe, Chris, we've gotten most of the questions here.
Yeah, I think we have. Thanks.
All right, everybody. Well, thank you for taking the first step in the process, which is spending an hour with us. Go to the QR code or vetrepreneur.com, sign up for coaching. I hope I get the chance to chat with a few of you who are on the meeting. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
From the battlefields to the boardrooms, the spirit of a veteran is unyielding. Risk takers, disciplined executors, team builders. Military service has forged us into professionals with the ability to get it done. But what's next after service? Meet the legends: Fred Smith, founder of FedEx; Jewett Cathy, founder of Chick-fil-A; Ross Perot, founder of Perot Systems; Phil Knight, founder of Nike; and Gordon Logan, founder of Sport Clips. They turned their military discipline into entrepreneurial success. And so can you. Why franchising? It's the ideal pathway for a vetrepreneur, a proven business model, a roadmap to success, and an industry that understands the skills you bring. Franchising means using proven systems, intensive training, and a support system designed to make you successful. 1 out of every 7 franchises is owned by a military veteran. You can join their ranks. Your next mission awaits, and we're here to guide you. Your legacy is just beginning.